Maybe you need a simple beat. What about ambient generative music? How about just simple ideas? Thinking outside of the box, playing something at random, getting around keyboard skills, not having to pick up an instrument, doing something on the go. All of this and more is covered so well by Logic Pro's pattern editor. It takes MIDI instruments and just flips the mentality. A completely different experience from your typical MIDI piano roll. No keyboards required, no hardware. It's a super fun and different way to experience music creation and might unlock a few things in your music. While I've been dying to make this video for a while because I love it so much, I think by the end of the video, you will too. So let's not waste time, let's jump in and get started. Hey, my name is Steve, composer, engineer, and lecturer, and welcome back to the channel. Now, you've probably been creating MIDI regions like this, right? Either you come in here and you hit the record button, and you create a very simple MIDI region, you open up the MIDI editor, and there is your piano roll, typical kind of use. You could do all sorts of things. You could quantize the notes, you could remove certain notes, and with the pencil tool, add in others. It's a really quick way of being able to edit the performance that you've just recorded. Super useful and one of the best features of MIDI over sort of traditional acoustic playing. You don't have to perform this in though. On any MIDI or software instrument track, you can right click and choose to create a MIDI region. This creates a brand new region and you can drag that out to a different length if you'd like. And then in here, you can start programming your own thing. A really great way if you've got no keyboard and you just want to kind of add in ideas. It's sort of like notation, but as a MIDI piano roll. Now, there are just some instruments that this just doesn't make sense. For example, if I come over to the drum kits and I choose one of the drum kits here, of course we can play this on keyboard or on pad controllers, and it will record a MIDI region for us. This is probably how you're used to editing your drum tracks. Of course, you can highlight them all, you can quantize them, and you can see conveniently on a lot of kits, we've got these sorts of labels to help us out to know which key is what sound. If I wanted to change this second snare hit, for example, to claps, I can easily do that just by dragging it down. Now, it is still fast and convenient, but we're using a piano roll. We're using notes on a percussion instrument that isn't really tuned to notes in the way that we think of them on a piano or a keyboard, or even just a guitar or whatever other instrument. Drum kits are percussive, they're hits. We don't need to dictate how long a note is held. You also don't need a pitch. C1 is often used for kick, but that's not actually the pitch that the kick is at. It's just the random key that we've all decided we're going to use it with. So a little while ago, Logic brought in a really cool feature, which is something called a pattern region instead of a MIDI region. If I get rid of this MIDI region and I right click and instead go create pattern region, something cool will happen. It throws in a new type of region. And when we zoom out, we can see this is now in place of our piano roll. It's something called the step sequencer. This is actually much more common to drum programming than anything else that we would have seen in the past. So let's dive in and take a look at what this thing can do. Now, let's say to start with, we're not going to do anything adventurous, but you're definitely going to see some cool applications of this throughout this video, so stay tuned because there is a lot to cover in this one little feature. But we're just going to start with a simple beat to begin with. Right here, what we're looking at is each one of these tracks inside this step sequencer is a different note or a different drum. So we've got the kick, and we can just click on the track anywhere on the track that isn't a button to make that kick sound, so we can hear what it sounds like. We can do that with any of them, so this snare center, for example. So we can quickly hear what is actually assigned to each track, and then we start putting in our pattern. So let's just click on these squares to start adding in a pattern. The way I'm adding in this pattern is I'm looking at this as 16th notes. Every one of these squares is a 16th note. So we're looking at 144 bar of 16th notes. Up here though, the region is actually dragged across 4 different bars, and we can drag that even further. We can drag it across 8 bars, for example. That means it will repeat this 1 bar pattern continuously until the region runs out. Simple, really fast creation of a drum beat there. We can of course add in some hats, for example. Maybe something like that. Now let's say, for instance, we want something that's a 2-bar pattern. We can change the steps from 16 16th notes to say 32 16th notes, which will take 2 bars of 4/4. In the top right of the screen, we can see 16 steps has been selected, but if we change that to 32, we can see that that jumps and creates a whole other section. So now we've got 2 bars rather than just 1. Now let's make some changes towards the end. Let's take away this last hi-hat hit and put an open hi-hat hit. So really quickly, we've doubled the beat into 2-bar pattern, and it's going to loop for as long as that region editor is there. Now, what if you want to add or change velocity? That's something you can easily do in piano roll by opening up the automation lanes and just dragging up and down the velocity hits. But you can do it here as well in the pattern editor. Let's look at the kick, for example, because we know that the kick on the first beat is going to be stronger than this one. So we probably want to adjust the velocity to reflect that. Over here, if you click open this disclosure triangle, we get a few options, namely our velocity. So we can drag up or down our velocity hits accordingly. The really cool thing is you can randomize it as well. For example, down here on our hi-hats, they're all playing at the same volume, very unrealistic. But if I just right click and go randomize, we can see a bit of a different adjustment. Let's see how that sounds. It could definitely use with some tweaking there because some of them have gone a little bit too low, but you get a little bit of randomness in there. Now, one feature that's really cool that's right next to it is the note repeat. And this might help with those trap beats and that sort of thing, where we get those triplet hits on a single beat. Let's say on this hit here, for example, we actually want 3 notes to be played on that one hit. If I just drag this up and down, I can increase the note hits all the way up to 16 there, but I'm just going to bring it down, let's say 3. So you can hear that sort of triplet sound that's now happening on that one hit. And you can randomize all of those as well. Now there are some also really cool features when you start adding these sorts of changes in. When you're looking down here, you may see these shuffle buttons, and basically they're to rotate whatever you've got here along the grid. So if I click on this one to the right, for example, our note repeat has shifted on. And now it's shifted on again, and I can shift it back. By doing this, we're rotating the whole grid on that one line to offset that square to the next one. That way, if you click it twice to the right, for example, your beat 3 hit is actually going to happen on 3 and. Check it out on velocity as well. You can see all of these get adjusted. So it just helps cycle and rotate through, which is kind of a nice little feature. Add a little bit of variety, try something different. Now, what if we want to add something that's not really there at the moment? I was looking for a crash earlier, but I actually couldn't see one. Let's check out that. So in this kit, we don't have a crash at the moment, but if I come up to this plus button, this is dedicated for adding new tracks. New tracks will be a new sound. So if I hit the plus button here, I can jump into specific notes and I can find the labeled notes. So our drum kit has already got all the notes labeled for whatever sound that they actually play, which is super convenient because I can now skim through here and find a crash. Let's go crash left, for example. Let's click on the title and see what we're working with. Yeah, that could work quite well. So let's click the first one here and turn off this hi-hat hit. And now we have a crash at the beginning. Adds another little bit of variety. If you want every single hit available to you on that drum kit available in the grid, you can do that quickly. You don't have to add each individual one either. Up here, when you hit the plus button, you can move into notes, go into labeled notes and just go add unused. Absolutely everything will get added at that point that isn't there already. If you're also not keen on a particular sound and you're actually wishing you could put that onto a different hit, say the whole snare drum line onto a snare drum click track instead, you don't have to unclick everything and then re-click everything on the next track. You can just swap out the sound. For instance, this center hit here, I could change that to something different. If I come into my labeled notes, maybe I'll hit snare side stick. You'll notice that the hit did not change, it didn't move, but now we got a new sound. Super easy to swap out, nice and easy to use. You can also color these tracks to make it a little bit easier if you like, to be able to spot what's there and what's not and what's a particular thing. Let's say, for example, all of the symbols, I want to organize them all at the bottom and I want to see them all in blue. I can click and drag any of these down to the bottom, so that makes it nice and easy to drag all of these down. And then if I hit Option C on my keyboard, it brings up the color palette and I can choose a different color for each of these tracks. It makes it super easy, super convenient. Helps your eyes skim over what is what, I find, when you color code things. It's a really good feature. Down in these tracks, there are a lot of powerful options. We've already seen a few of them, like right-clicking and randomizing the velocity, but you could randomize the note repeat if you wanted. Now we've got a whole range of different things. And if you don't quite like that, you can clear the note repeat. You could right-click on the row here and actually randomize the steps, so you get something entirely different. You can randomize them again. Find new combinations. You don't have to be the one generating all of these individual unique hits yourself. You can randomize a few things and see what you like. Sounds quite good, and it's just completely randomized. It's very easy at any time to come in and edit the row name or clear all the steps, so it's really fast and easy to edit in this way. Now the magic, of course, is that this doesn't just work for drum patterns. This works for melodic and pitched instruments as well. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so let's take a look at the pattern editor in terms of a melodic instrument. And this is where you can start to get towards that generative ambient music if you want it to, or just complete chaos if you want as well. You could use it to compose lines intentionally, or you can use it to create some really unusual and unexpected things. So I've just added in a simple synthesizer that just has some plucky type sounds to it. And I'm gonna right click and create a patterned region. Now this looks exactly the same and it functions exactly the same. It's just that now we're looking at pitched notes. If I click this top note here, it's a C. If I click this bottom note here, it's the bottom C, and it's all of the melodic notes in that C major scale being shown here. Of course, you can add more notes if you want to. You could jump up here and add additional notes. You can add a C sharp, for example. Whatever you like, you can add it in. For now though, I'm just going to use a C major scale. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to click and drag over this whole space, and it will add in notes wherever my mouse drags. That's something a bit chaotic, but we'll get started with that. So obviously, as soon as I hit play, it's gonna try and play this. Now it's sounding a little bit kind of very much attacky because it's all the same velocity. So let's randomize some velocity and see how it sounds. So of course, just like before, I would come in and I would right click and randomize velocity. I'm just gonna do that for every track. Already starting to get a little bit more life into it. You may have noticed that there's a new option called tie, and this is where we can create longer than 16th notes because each one of those blocks is just a 16th note, but maybe we want a combination of 16th, 18th, quarter notes, whatever we want. We can use the tie feature to make this happen. For example, we have 3 notes here. If I wanted to tie at least 2 of them together, I could open up my track, and with this tie feature, if I just click this little arrow that's pointing to the next note, it will tie it over to the next note. I could do that for the whole thing if I wanted. And you can see the velocity and gate is changing here to reflect that as well. I might go around and do that to a few different notes. Okay, so I've done that and I've gone through and tidied up a few of the excess notes as well. So now it sounds a little bit like this. Starting to sound a little bit unusual, right? It's a little bit cool. Is C major the best for it? Let's see if we can change that. At the top right corner here, we actually have a way of just changing the scale. If I want it to be F instead of C. Maybe I want it to be natural minor. I think G minor there sounds pretty interesting. All it's done is update these notes relative to the scale that I'm choosing. So you can see it's no longer from C to C, it's from G to G, and all of these are part of the natural minor. Of course, if you know your music theory, A sharp isn't in there, that would normally be a B flat, but Logic doesn't have a way of labeling things as B flat, it just labels everything as sharp. So if you want a flat, you're gonna see a sharp. Now, there are plenty more features under the hood. Let's push it a little bit further and make this more generative and ambient and random. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the step rate of only some and certain specific notes. What I mean by this is that on each track we have the option to change this 16th to something different. And at the top we have the option to change the whole lot to something different. So at the start of this video I said that the 16 steps, they represent 16th notes. And of course that is the case to begin with. But if we change this to 8th, we're going to slow the whole thing down. Now that bar that was 1 bar of 16th notes is now 2 bars of 8th notes. Still 16 notes altogether, but their duration is now changed to 8th notes. So each square is now an 8th note. Now the cool thing is here that you don't have to just change it overall, you can change it on individual lines. When you jump in here, let's just choose a few of them to be a little bit different. Let's choose 16 here, 16 there. Maybe let's make this one 4 and make this one 32. Let's just see how that sounds. Never quite the same. I did change that 32nd there to a 16th again because the 32nd was just a bit too chaotic, but you can see how each sound was never quite the same, which was really, really cool. Now we've randomized velocity, but maybe let's randomize a few note repeats on some of these. Let's take this low G, and you can see I don't have a note repeat here, but if I click this little plus button, we can actually start adding on different options. So I could actually jump in here and create a whole ton of different options, new options that I want. Some of these are absolutely excellent. So there we go. I've added in all of the different options that we've got. Let's take a look at adding in note repeat on this first one, maybe to a 3. We could take that away and maybe add something like a start offset. So actually it starts a little bit later. Or we could even decrease the chance of this playing. You can even skip the note entirely just by clicking this button, and it will just blank it all out. But it won't just skip the note as if there's no note playing. It now shortens the whole loop by that one little spot. So when we start the loop again, this note won't even play. The first note will be this one. It just refuses to play that note altogether. You can even change the note itself. You know, this is the G2 note, but let's change it to G3 just for that one. So you can hear that sneaky little G3 popping in there because the chance it's not always going to happen because the chance isn't set to 100%. So that's still active as well. So let me just go through and just randomize things like chance. Maybe the skip. Let's see what we can do. So on this one, I might find chance. Let's randomize the chance. Let's do the same for this one over here. We'll randomize the chance. Let's also randomize the octave. See what that happens. Now it's going to play at lots of different octaves. Let's do the same to this one as well. Let's find the octave one as well and randomize the octave. Now let's see what it sounds like. Starting to sound more chaotic, more intriguing and interesting, that's for sure. So it is crazy what you can do with just some of these randomized features. But it doesn't just stop at notes. No, you can actually randomize and control from this pattern editor things like MIDI CC automation. This piano sound, for example, when you use the CC control number 1 or the mod wheel, you get a little bit of a vibrato type feel. So let's add some of that in as well. In here in the plus button, I'm going to choose automation and I'm going to choose the mod wheel. Number 1 modulation. This is added in an entirely new type of lane. So I'm going to choose to change the modulation in a few spots here. And I'm going to set this middle one here to 100%. Let's see what happens. You can hear that little kind of spicy addition of the vibrato there. It's really, really cool. But you've got all the same controls that you have with the note a lot of the time as well. Things like chance, for example. Maybe this doesn't happen every single time. If I click plus here until I find the chance, yep, here we go. So let's maybe set this one. So you can hear it kicking in there some of the time, which is really, really cool. You can also add different loop points. So if you like a particular pattern, but you actually want something to repeat in a shorter frame, you can do that as well. Let's say, for instance, I quite like some of the stuff that's going on in the middle here. Maybe this track here, if I open it up, I want to loop just this middle section. I've got this loop start and stop, and I can just drag it to the looping points. I've dragged it into just 2 beats there, and it will loop just those 2 beats in this section. So you can see the block pacing along only in this one section, and then when it reaches the end here, it just goes back. The cool thing about this is you could create odd patterns in here that don't repeat strictly in a 4/4 bar. For instance, if I open this one up, maybe I want a loop in here. Let's find it, there we go. Let's create a loop over just a few of these beats. Now I've got 7/8 notes, not 8, which is going to create an irregular pattern. So we're creating a lot of chaos and a lot of interest there. Just by randomizing things like loop points and chance and velocity and all these different controls that are available to you in this pattern editor. And it makes it so cool to just kind of try different things. Now, a lot of what I've done at the end of the video here is really geared towards ambient generative music. But let's just go back to that drum beat for a second and experiment with some of these tools. Quick revision, this is what our drum beat sounds like. Quite nice, right? Let's add some of these little extra features in. If I just clear out the hi-hats, I'll show you why this is magic. If I just right click and I'm just gonna clear the row entirely, I'm just gonna now click and drag across this whole track here. I've created 16th note hi-hat hits. Now that will sound horrendous because of the machine gunning effect, phenomenon that happens where the same sample is played repetitively at the same velocity again and again very quickly. Just doesn't sound realistic, does it? Let's randomize some chance and randomize some velocity and see what happens. So if I randomize the velocity there, randomize the chance, straight off the bat, let's see what it sounds like. You know, I could get behind that. That sounds pretty cool, actually. It sounds like someone's just kind of playing around a little bit, improvising a little bit. Sounds a bit robotic at the moment. I might want to, tweak it a little bit, but it's starting to get there into something really, really cool and interesting. Let's just try changing some step rates as well. If I change this kick drum to 8th and let everything else continue at the 16th, what does that sound like? You know what? I like that. I dig it. I think that sounds pretty cool too. Let's speed up these claps. Another cool sounding addition. So you can see how all of these tools come back to the rhythm elements if you want them to. All of them are so powerful. And the main thing is that this pattern region, helps you with these sorts of tasks like ambient or generative music or rhythm pattern creation, because they don't use a system that feels so clunky for something that doesn't use a piano. But it also forces you out of the box. You're not just constantly writing with pianos and keyboards and MIDI rolls. You're actually going to be using something entirely different, which is going to force you to do something different. What comes out of it may not be your typical kind of composition. So why not play around with it and see what you create? It would be really cool to experience if you got Logic Pro. I would love it if you'd let me know in the comments whether this has been useful to you. You can of course subscribe for more on your way out as well. But otherwise, for now, I will catch you in the next one.